The Story Dragon Podcast presents the Time Capsule from the 90s. It all started on a rainy Saturday afternoon. 10-year-old Johnathan and his 8-year-old sister Maisie were stuck in the house with nothing to do. Their mom had asked them to help their dad clean out the attic above the garage, a space they had never really explored before. "I bet it's just a bunch of old junk," Johnathan muttered as he climbed up the pull-down ladder. Maisie, always the more curious one, grinned.
"Or maybe there's a treasure."
As the two crawled into the dimly lit space, dust swirled in the flashlight beams. Old boxes, a rocking chair, and holiday decorations sat among the stacks of mysterious containers labeled with black marker. But one box caught their attention immediately. It was marked with a single word: Mom. Johnathan pried open the box, and both of the kids gasped. Inside was a collection of colorful, mysterious objects, stacks of shiny metal discs, a weird black rectangle with spools inside, and a chunky handheld device with buttons and a tiny screen. Maisie picked up one of the shining discs.
"Ooh, is this a mirror? It has a hole in the middle."
Johnathan shook his head. "I don't think so, but I have no idea what that is." They dug deeper, pulling out a television with a boxy back and a camcorder with a flip-out screen. "Oh man, is this a TV? This thing weighs a ton," said Johnathan.
"What is all this stuff?"
Maisie asked, wide-eyed. Johnathan shrugged. "I think it's from the 90s, when Mom was growing up. We should ask her about it later." But before they called for her, they spotted something even more intriguing. There was one of the little plastic rectangles that said Meg's Mix on black marker. Their mom's name was Meg.
"What's a mix?"
Maisie asked. "I'm not sure," said Johnathan, "but, I think I've seen something like this in the movies. I think this is called a cassette tape, and it's for recording and playing music, too." The kids rummaged further and found an old cassette player. It was bulky, with big buttons labeled play, rewind, fast forward, stop, and record. They pressed the button labeled open, and a trapdoor opened for the cassette. "Weird," they said. Johnathan put the cassette inside and slid it into the chamber. He closed the door and pressed play as the two wheels inside the machine began to turn with a crackling, fuzzy sound. A fuzzy voice filled the attic as they listened. "Testing, testing, this is Meg. And this is my totally awesome mixtape. Get ready for the greatest songs ever." Maisie's jaw dropped. "Is that Mom?" Johnathan snorted. "She sounds so different." Maisie nodded.
"She sounds cool."
Johnathan grinned. "Let's see what else is here." They found more tapes. A book full of those mirrors with the holes in them. The label said Meg CDs. And a VHS tape labeled Skating Queen in messy handwriting.
"What's a VHS?"
Maisie asked, tilting her head. Johnathan frowned. "I think it's like an old movie kind of thing." They scrambled through the attic and they found an old VCR. It was a machine that was used to play VHS tapes, and it had a little trap door on it just the right size to fit the tape in. With great effort, they carried the heavy, boxy TV and the VCR down to the garage, setting it up with their dad's help. "All right," Johnathan said, popping in the tape. "Let's see what's on this." The TV flickered, and suddenly, a younger version of their mom appeared on the screen. She had purple hair, ripped jeans, and a flannel shirt with a wallet chain dangling from her pocket. She stood at the top of the driveway, holding a skateboard that was in a shape they hadn't seen before. Watch this, younger mom said, and then zoom! She rolled down the driveway, popped the board into the air, and landed on the wall with a perfect grind along the whole length. She rode the entire length of the wall on the board sideways. It was so cool. Maisie's eyes widened.
Wow, Mom was a skateboarder?
Leo chuckled. No way. Mom is like normal. They watched as younger mom skated around, flipping her board and laughing with her friends. They were all dressed in band t-shirts and baggy jeans. Maisie turned to Johnathan.
We have to show her this.
When Mom saw the TV screen, her face turned bright red. Oh, wow, I haven't seen this in years. Johnathan pointed at the screen. Mom, you had purple hair and a wallet chain. Maisie grinned.
And you could skate.
Mom laughed, shaking her head. Yeah, that was me back then. Back in the day, I was pretty cool. Johnathan held up the CD. And what's this? Mom smirked. That, my dear children, is a CD. It's how we used to listen to music before everything was just on the phone. And they were really expensive. We had to go to the store and buy them. And they were about $20 or more a piece. Maisie tapped it.
But it just looks like a mirror with a hole in it.
Mom laughed. You put it in the CD player and it plays music. Oh, and that cassette you found? That was my mixtape. We had to record our favorite songs from the radio. Jonathan's eyes widened. Wait, you had to wait for the song to come on and then record it? Mom nodded. And if the DJ on the radio talked over anything at the beginning, you had to start the tape over and record it again. Maisie groaned. That sounds like so much work. Mom shrugged. It was fun. And don't even get me started on how much work it was to rewind VHS tapes after you had watched them. You had to rewind the whole thing all the way back to the beginning or it wouldn't work. But the cassette tapes with the music were really fun. You could record your friends. You could play it back. You could record over and over and over on the same tape. You never really had to buy music if you were careful and you were able to record the songs on the radio to play later. Johnathan chuckled. Wow, the 90s were wild. Mom ruffled his hair. They really were, sweetie. That night, Johnathan and Maisie made their own 90s zone in their rooms. They set up the cassette player, listened to Mom's mixtape, and even figured out how to work the CD player too. As they lay in bed, listening to crazy rock from the 90s called grunge, where everybody was wearing plaid and had long hair. It didn't look like it was washed very thoroughly. They smiled and tried to imagine what life was like back then. As they lay in their beds, Maisie whispered, I think Mom was way cooler than we ever knew when she was a kid. Johnathan smiled. Yeah, and now we have all her cool stuff to see what it was she was up to back then. As the rain pattered against the window, the sound of an old 90s song played softly from the cassette player. The attic had truly been a time capsule, and the adventure was something they'd never forget. And as Johnathan drifted off to sleep, he laughed softly to himself. The 90s called. They want your mom back. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Story Dragon podcast and got a little bit of an understanding what the 90s were really like. If you're interested in listening to more great podcasts, go ahead and click on one more episode from the Story Dragon podcast. Until next time, bye everyone.